Hey, welcome back. We're here in the shop this morning, and I'm just doing some knife sheaths for the sales floor. We've sold quite a few of them, so we're trying to put some together. I'm doing some tooled floral ones and then some basket stamped ones as well. So we've got all these tooled up, so we're just going to let these kind of dry and get ready to put them together and assemble them. But we've done a video already on making these pancake knife sheaths for the case trapper knife. I've had some people ask about how do I design one of these for a different knife from this, or if I don't have a pattern for a trapper knife, how would I create the pattern so that the pancake sheath will fit a particular knife? So let's get in the video. I'm going to show you how I do that. Okay, so here I've just got a piece of scrap poster board, and what I like to do is go ahead. Now my bag punch or slot punch that makes the slots for the belt to go through right there, that is actually a 2-inch punch. So this punch here makes a 2-inch slot. And so what I like to do, this straight edge here is 2 inches wide roughly, and it's just a big drywall straight edge. And so these are pretty handy to have around in the shop. This one here is about 60 inches long. I've got one over there that's longer than that, but makes it really nice for straight edge in your sides of leather for cutting belts or anything like that. But it'll also come in handy here for what we're going to do. So what I'm going to do is just draw me a line here. Now, like I said, typically on a belt, it's not 2 inches wide, it's 1.5 inches, but that gives us a little bit of play so that we can, so that the slot, any size belt, 1.75 inches or 1.5 inches, will fit through those slots. Once I've got that line drawn, then what I like to do is go ahead and take our knife and arrange it on that line to the height and to the angle that you want, and also do it the way the blades. To me, when somebody's wearing a knife sheath, my preferred is to have the blades facing backwards, like to their back. And that way when they pull the knife out of the sheath, it's ready to open, right? So if you do it that way, the other way where the blades face forward, then when you pull it out, sometimes you've got to flip the knife. You got to make one flip to be able to grab. But if you do it the other way, when you pull the knife out, you're ready to grab the blade and open it. It just makes it a little bit more comfortable. So that's the way I do it. But you do it however you want to do. But I always do the small end down, because that'll keep that sheath from overstretching and the knife falling out of it. So you want to keep the bigger end, whatever end is bigger, keep it on the top or the outside of the sheath. And then what we want to do is we want to decide, do we want this knife sheath? Imagine this line here that we drew with the straight edge, that this is actually the belt. So do we want the knife sheath straight up and down, or do we want it at an angle? The more angle you give it, the wider the sheath is going to have to be. So just keep that in mind. But we're going to do this one, just keep it simple. We'll just do it straight up and down. And then you want to decide how high up on the body do you want it. Remember, this is the belt. So I usually like to keep the hilt, I guess, or the back end of the knife. I like to keep enough to where we can grab it and pull it out of the sheath, but that's not so high that it's going to jab the person in the love handle area, if you will, or the side. So or the back, wherever they're going to put it. So I don't want it too high. So I like to keep it, say, about like that, which would be roughly 1 inch above the belt, something like that. Somewhere around there is usually good. Then what I want to do is I want to go ahead and trace the knife off, the profile of the knife, onto our poster board here. Not be exact, but you just basically need the profile of it. So now we've got the knife drawn on there. Now here's where our initial measurements are going to come into play here, because you want to see how thick the knife is. Most pocket knives are going to be roughly the same thickness depending on the handles. Some of your bone handles will be much thicker. Some of your bigger knives, the overall thickness of the knife may be a lot more than this. But usually for most knives, about 3/8 of an inch will work just fine for what our next step here. And because what you're going to want to do on a pancake especially is that whole knife sheath opens like that as you stick the knife in there. So what you want to do is give enough clearance. And what I found on a trapper is going to be 3/8 of an inch from the outside profile. So about 3/8 of an inch. You can go a little bit less if you want to, depending on, you might have to make 1 or 2 of these and make a few adjustments depending on how difficult the knife is that you're making. But 3/8 for me will usually give you plenty of clearance. And so we'll come out 3/8 of an inch off each side of that knife, and we'll put us a line. And when make those lines much bigger than you think you need, just so that you've got plenty, because we're going to shape around here in just a minute. So now these are going to be what we call our stitch lines. So this is going to be the interior stitch line here. That's actually what's sizing this thing to fit a certain knife. So you can bring that stitch line in or out depending on how much meat you have out here, to adjust for a little bit different knife. And now I want to give it about the same distance along the bottom where our stitch line is going to be. We get, you know, about 3/8, maybe a little less than 3/8 away from the knife, because if you get too close, you're going to end up pushing the knife out the top of this just a little bit more than you intended to. So we'll do that there. So then, in my opinion, from that stitch line right there, you need at least 1 inch. You can go a little bit more if you want your sheaths to be a little bit bigger, you know, a little bit meatier, I guess, more material around the outside. But I find 1 inch is probably plenty from your interior stitch line. Then we'll do 1 inch there and 1 inch on this side. And now we'll run a couple lines here. And none of this has to be perfect dead on. I mean, you can adjust this to your liking however you want. So now we've got our interior stitch line here, and then our outer, these outside lines are the outside of the material here. So as you can see, those are, you know, this one's a little bit bigger than what the actual pattern is. If we put my pattern on here, I kind of brought it in and refined it just a little bit, but this gives you a good starting point to where you can kind of start to get a shape and a design. And then what I like to do is go ahead in between these two lines is put our 2-inch bag punch. That has to be where this belt is, where we drew the original lines there. So what I'll usually do is just center it between these two lines and then kind of look at it and make sure that we've got enough space right there for that slot. And this is where you can make a decision for yourself on whether you have enough material on the outside or whether you want to add a little bit more or whatever. But that's giving us the critical things right now, which is our stitch line for the size of the knife, giving us enough space, and then where our 2-inch bag punches are. So now all these measurements here are giving us our critical things that we need so that we can get the shape of the knife sheath that we're going to be building. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to use red here so that y'all can see that maybe a little better in the video. But we know that the slot here is important, so we've got to keep those where they are. And then this is roughly the outside of the actual material of the sheath. And so this is our bottom. And now you can adjust the front here if you want a nice little curve, like ours has a little curve here in the front to where when the knife's in there it's lower than the back side. You can do that however you want to do it, and that's how I prefer to do it. So what we'll do is just kind of come here and we'll just bring us a little curve right there to where it's a little bit higher than the belt. And then come to our line here and draw a shape that looks nice. You can do this, you can come all the way straight here if you wanted to, or you can curve that in. I usually like to curve it in just a little bit so it's got a little bit of shape to it. But you can make these as simple or as complicated as you want as far as the outside shape. And now a trick is if you're doing these just vertical, you can definitely draw one side and then make you a center line, trace this side off, flip it over here and trace it over there. For the sake of the video, I'm just going to kind of eyeball this, but if you want it symmetrical, you can do that. If you're doing one at an angle to where it's angled a little bit or something, you won't be able to do that because one side will be shaped differently than the other. As you can see here, this shape here is different than this shape, so we couldn't do that there. But on a vertical one, you could definitely just flip it over and do that. And then these would be our stitch lines here. So that's how I go about kind of getting my basic shape. You can refine this and, like I said, adjust this to make it just the way you want it to look. Once it's good, then you can go ahead and cut this piece out and that'll be your pattern. You can go ahead and make these bag slots or slotted punches here if you'd like, but make you some markers for these stitch lines because those are going to be important. And then you can actually use this for your pattern to make the back side. Now our back side here of our knife sheath has this little raised area, so it's above where the front is. If you want to do that, just come in here and you can add that. When you trace, you're going to trace this off onto a new spot, and then you can come in here and just add that. And then I usually will add just a little bit of feather around there for the back piece. I prefer to do that. If you don't want to do that and you want to save die money and just have one die made and just reverse it, that's fine, but I prefer to have a little bit of feather because these will stretch as you're tooling them. And so when we tool them and then add them to the front, I don't want to try to line two pieces that are exact up. So that's how we do that for a case knife. Any other knife is going to be about the same. Like I said, right here, this distance from the outside profile of the knife to the interior stitch line is going to be 3/8, 5/16, something like that. You can go down to 5/16 if you'd rather, and get it a little bit closer so it's a little snug. But I would, somewhere in that neighborhood of 3/8 to 5/16 on each side of the knife profile, and then I leave myself about 1 inch from the outside of the material to the stitch line, and that'll usually give you enough. You can add more, you can add less, whatever you want to do, but that'll give you a way to where you can figure out exactly how to create this knife sheath to fit a knife. Like I said, if you're going to do an angled one, real quick, I'll show you. You're going to want to set that angle, whatever angle that you want to do. Like I said, ours are angled, and so you're going to want to do that. Just do the same thing. You trace the knife off on the belt based on height and the angle that you want. But once you do that, then what you've got to do is come in here, and we'll do off the edge of the knife, the widest part, by the way, be sure you're using that. Then we'll kind of come in here and do there. I'm just using 3/8 on this one. We'll draw these lines. And then we'll do the same thing. Do about 1 inch off that line. All these lines will be parallel, roughly. And then we'll come here and do the bottom. Just staying about the same distance away from the bottom of the sheath. Because what this distance is doing is allowing for the thickness of the knife when it goes inside the sheath. So you want to have the same on the bottom as well. Now your bag punches or your slots will have to be at an angle just like the knife. So what we're going to do is go ahead on that. When you're going across, this is a 2-inch line for our belt that we originally drew. You're going to have to go at an angle, which is going to make obviously a longer distance, so it's more than 2 inches. But what I do is just line it up with this top line here. Don't worry about the bottom line, because your belt's not going to be 2 inches. It's going to be 1.5 inches. So do the same thing, and then just kind of center that up in your space. Trace off your bag slot. Do the same on this side. Try to keep them the same angle. Like that there. And then we do the same thing here. We'll come up here, leave some material from the top of your bag punch to the top of the material. And just kind of play with your shape of it till you get it the way you like it. You've got all the critical things taken care of here with your bag slots and your interior stitch lines here. So as long as those are in place, the exterior shape or the perimeter shape of that deal isn't that critical, because you've got everything else taken care of. So now your belt will pass through, the knife will sit at the proper angle that you want. So now you'll be able to take this, cut it out, use it to make your back panel piece pattern, and then it'll fit whatever particular knife that you designed it for. Be sure and write what knife it is on the pattern so that you don't get confused and use the wrong one for the a knife that doesn't fit in there as well. And I hope that helps you. Like I said, it's pretty simple, but that's how I do it whenever you're trying to create a pancake knife sheath, and I hope that helps y'all. We'll see you all in the next video.